It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Cornell Brown to you. Dr. Brown, yes, is a senior lecturer. Why is Cornell laughing? He's not a stranger, but we will still introduce him. Dr. Cornell Brown is a senior lecturer at the Hartrust NTA Vocational Training Development Institute. He holds a bachelor's degree from Lincoln University, USA, a master's degree in continuing and vocational education from the University of Wisconsin, USA, and a doctorate of education from the National Louis University, USA. I am confident that Dr. Brown is more than competent and prepared to deliver on the subject, teaching to change attitude, applying transformational learning strategies in the classroom. I present to you Dr. Brown. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. All right, we're very smart. You're a participant of, right? You know what, Mrs. Stark? Right, I'm gonna tell you that if you're anybody who's working as in supervisory position, not really teaching learning, they can come on in because we're gonna do some emotionally charged stuff which I think supervisors can benefit from. So if you can join. All right, how are we doing?
Good here.
We're gonna talk about welcome, Marjorie. Here's an outline for this quick session that we're doing. And a bit too far for everybody. I need to come on and sit right here.
That's Jeanette.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go. Alright. I move your stuff though because I'm too far for everybody. So I'm not coming.
Oh, it's a register, yes.
You know, I put it there because of what you say.
Oh, well, can I catch me right here? I don't want to seem too hard.
You can catch them with your lighting.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
this works.
It's good.
And all right, are you setting it up, right? Because I need you and somebody else. So that I need you and someone else to volunteer later on or something.
Really?
Yes, and to make that most effective, I'm gonna give you a heads up. Study this way. I'm gonna shoot you and study it. I'm gonna have you two guys volunteer later on. So you're gonna have to be doing a little multitasking to. This is not a touch screen. All right, so we're going to talk about, it's really a theoretical construct called transformative learning. And it has applications above and beyond the teaching learning situation. We use a lot of the strategies in interventions for people who are in supervisory role. To make it very, very practical for you to understand, transformational learning is proposed as an alternative to what we call informational learning. And it talk about your supervisory role, since we've invited some people to come on in. You might be observing behavioral patterns among the persons you supervise, or with respect to an individual you supervise. Good? And so the big question is, if you say those whatever behavior you're observing is not ideal, inappropriate, then the question becomes, so what do you want to do about it? You want to change it, right? And so let me just ask you the question in sort of a grounded way. Then if you want to change a behavioral pattern, what do you do? What are some of the things you can do? Where is that?
Beat them.
Yeah. Actually,
Beat them into submission.
yeah.
Corporate
Can I share a
punishment.
story about my
Yeah, go ahead.
and,
While I search this.
who is 13 months,
Uh-huh.
which is, thank you, 13 months old, and just constantly digging up my plants, and I was of the opinion that he would go to sleep every night and think of what new thing to destroy. So on Saturday, I was totally fed up, and I took him to JSPCA and said, I'm giving this dog up for adoption.
Right.
My heart was a bit heavy, but I thought, listen, let me do it now before I just weak out. And the person came and said to me, why are you giving up your dog? And I said, well, he's just totally destructive and I can't deal with it. And I also asked if I could look at other dogs too, other puppies too.
Right.
And she said, well, if you do that, there is no guarantee that the other puppy you get will not do the same thing.
Right.
I can look at your dog and see that it has a bit of sheepdog in there. So I said, so what am I to do now? And she said, well, it's a matter of training, right? That's, your dog is probably digging up because he's a bit bored. Do you walk him? Shamefacedly, I said, no. She said he needs some exercise, walk him, train him, that when he does things, you know, to tell him no, and if he even behaves good for a little bit, you reinforce him, right? Give him a treat, it could be even a cheese tricks. And then, of course, bathe him, because he had a little flea problem. So, I thought, I haven't been doing any of that. Also too, that he needs to have his own space to build a kennel for him. At that point I thought, Anyway, so what I did was we have a dog chair for the other dog, put another chair there, put a cushion in it. So one, he has his space. I've started walking him, right? And I have started hitting him on the nose when he tries to jump up on me and all that. Amazingly, that was Saturday to yesterday. No destruction in the yard yet. So I think an intervention, and although it's a dog, an intervention, it also was a lesson for me. That it could be so effective in so short a time, you know, not good.
And that's, even though you say it's a dog, there's a very famous experiment that anyone who has done psychology would be familiar with, Roger's work. And a dog was actually used in that situation. Right. So, training, which a lot of people say, education is separate from training, because training is more robotic. It's sort of pitched at a lower level, which is, you come back to this thing about the tagline for the trust, which says, what is it, skill is power, and then like my good friend Louis would cross out skill and put knowledge is power. but you come back to this thing, so you train to change a particular behavior. So let's come to the core of the argument. When you say you are trying to bring about change, and what you did, reward punishment is typically the approach you use with animals, because you're appealing to instinct, where the animal recognizes that if a particular behavior is demonstrated, then a particular reward is given. And so wanting what is satisfactory to the animal, then the animal will portray the positive behavior. Now you use that with human beings, but some people go a little bit critical, and you have to really go on another step with human beings. So we talk about different versions of change. I think I would have mentioned this in the workshop before. But there are four dominant versions of change that we attend to in transformative learning. When you say your mission is to change a behavior, you first have to determine what kind of change you want. Now, if you want what we call change by exception, which is what you just explained relative to the story with the dog, then all you have to do is threaten people with consequences. And in supervisory role, that is typically what's done in some organizations, where people are fearful of the consequences so they will conform.
But does it work?
Well, if you're not fearful of the consequences, then the strategy will not work. So if you come to work late, you are going to be fired. So there's nothing that says I believe genuinely in being punctual.
Maybe
I am just
man being fired.
well, and again, if I don't care about being fired, then the negative behavior is going to be dominant. It's not the first step. The first version is change by exception, which says you threaten the undesirable behavior with consequences.
Before that, what you had said, identify the change that you want. Identify that change that you want.
Okay, well, so there are 4 versions of change that we attend to in transformative learning. And you start out, if your mission is to bring about change in anyone, then you determine what kind of change you want. Okay? So the kind of change you want will determine the strategy that you employ. Say that again?
The kind of behavior that you want.
Well, the behavior is representative of change.
Yeah.
In the end, change is what a situation that has transformed from what it used to be to what it now is. So what is the change that you want? The behavior is just symptomatic of something. Now, behavior does not genuinely mean that change has occurred.
Which is where I was going, and I wanted to find out, shouldn't the first step be trying to identify the genesis of the behavior?
The genesis of the behavior, no, you always plan with the end in mind. What is the point that you want to get to before you try to determine the root causes? Well, let's look at the versions of change. Let me be instructive and let me just. Well, because there are some versions of change that you are not even concerned about root causes. If you're going for change by exception, I don't care what the root causes are. I don't care why you come to work late. You need to be early. Now, you might have genuine reasons that you would really want me to listen to. But because I am going for change by exception, I don't care. So root causes, no effect.
And you may not have any control over those causes anyway.
And you might have no interest in wanting to know what they are.
Right.
So then that version of change, which is the simplest version of change in transformative theory, if you're going for change by exception, I don't care what your beliefs are, I don't care what your values are, I don't care what your situation is.
So what?
I am saying get to work at this time or else. Now we're saying, the theory says the behavior will modify because the individual is fearful of the consequences. So do not run the red light or else. And sometimes when I do this other intervention, I ask people, I sort of close my eyes, put your hands up. If there were no consequences for running the red light, would you stop?
No.
And a lot of you are being honest. So you stop because you're fearful of the
Consequence.
So that is just one version of change that we call change by exception.
And can you define that in a very systematic way for me? Sorry.
Define change by exception. Let me just bring it up and get a theoretical. I'm trying to get to my PowerPoint. This computer is Asian. Are we planning to change this computer though?
That's an informational question.
It's not well in the realm of the rhetorical, I suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's more effective to use your finger to move things on the screen. I guess we'll get there.
Welcome to the real world.
All right, so we move from that. So I'll put up the descriptors for each. And then there's pendulum change, which is somewhat similar to change by exception. Only that with pendulum change, as opposed to just having imposing consequences, you also make known what the rewards are for the positive behavior. So you're using sort of a dual effect. If you behave positively, then you'll be rewarded, incentive, right? And if you behave in a sort of negative way, you're going to be punished. So then the thinking is that the pendulum would swing to what? If you behave in a positive way, you're going to be rewarded. Negative behavior will be punished. The pendulum will swing to what?
Positive.
Should.
Should.
Might it still swing to the negative?
Yes.
Why?
Because I'm a rebel.
They want to be
There are whole
friends.
things, there are whole variables.
They don't agree with it.
They don't agree, right? Fundamental beliefs, values, and convictions. If you have fundamental underpinning schemas, then you are going to ignore anything that people label as reward. Because your behavior is really rooted in your fundamental beliefs and so on. You were saying?
A suicide bomber is.
As fundamental beliefs. Very
Yeah,
simple.
but I think it's an example of
Yes.
pendulum.
You're precise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah,
nothing
yeah,
that you
yeah.
can offer to me is going to convince me to do otherwise, because I believe fundamentally that if I take this particular path, I have something greater to achieve. So it's the belief that what you're saying.
144 virgins.
Say that again.
Yes,
Well,
144 virgins.
and if you believe that, then
Yeah.
yeah.
So what may appear
I don't
positive
Oh,
to
it's
you
open.
is negative to you.
In the other line, the limit 144 virgins.
Yeah.
Where is that digression taking us now?
So I'm getting the understanding here that if what you might think to be positive,
Yes.
the other person sees it as negative,
Right.
then they both are going in different directions.
I tried that. This computer is just Asian.
So your suicide bomber see a reward in committing suicide. Goes to heaven. Goes to heaven and
Alright,
he gets
let
his
me
reward.
this is not, I'll come back to it
What
later.
you can say to it, no, I don't want that kind of reward.
Yes, which one? No, I got it. This is the one. Before I go back to my presentation.
Yes.
Alright. So, in your role, so let me just, to be purposeful with this, because we have people who are faculty members and we have people who have supervisory responsibilities. So, the message is at this initial stage, do not frustrate yourself about behavior that you're observing. Make a determination as to what you want to do about the behavioral pattern. Okay? And once you have an understanding, and I'll spend a little bit of time just giving you an indication as to what sustains any behavior that you're seeing and why you need not be frustrated. So there are 4 versions of change. We spoke about exception, we spoke about pendulum, there's incremental, and then there's paradigm. Paradigm is the one that I'm going to deal with because that is transformation, all right? So incremental change is change that occurs over time, okay? So the best strategy for that one is to create an environment that really and truly accentuates positive behavior. So be the change that you want, you know the kind of thing?
Yep.
Right. So in the workplace or in the classroom, as the instructional leader, as the supervisor, you have to demonstrate positive behavior. And it's a thing like, hopefully people will adopt. Like you go into Emancipation Park and going on to Emancipation Park. If you're a litterer, you notice that it's very clean. And so if you throw stuff on the ground, people look at you very strange. They don't say anything, but they look at you weird. And when you look around, you're red. So if you keep going into that environment, the theory says incrementally, you will start to adjust. Because the environment requires you to make that sort of adjustment. Again, if you're fundamental in your ways of thinking, you are not going to adapt. That's why in organizations, sometimes, you hear people talk about this person is not the best fit for this organization. Right, because the organizations develop a culture over time. And you come into that situation, but if your fundamental schemas are so deep-rooted that you cannot adjust, then someone might pick up that you're just not fitting in. And some people say, well, that's discrimination.
Someone fit in for the moment, just appear.
Well, again, if you have change by exception notions saying this is what you're supposed to do or else, you must have the or else factor for change by exception to work. And if the or else factor is sort of, very punitive, then you get a particular kind of effect. If people feel like, look, I have nothing to fear, so do not run the red light or else. You say, or else what? Or else nothing really. They'll talk to you and tell you that you're a rude person.
You get that 5,000 certificates.
So if it's not trivial, then people say, oh, well, I'll just keep doing it. But if people are really fearful of the consequences, and that's how, at the state level, that's how governments are supposed to operate. That's why you're not allowed to have your own military. Because the state has to have the ultimate means of coercing you. So you have to conform. Even though you don't like the laws and so on, you have to conform.
What about the organization?
Organizations operate in the same way. But what most organizations that are promoting transformation as a part of learning are saying, look, this change by exception thing does not work, because then you have to set up people to be watching people. If people are genuinely, if it's the beliefs and the convictions that are dictating the behavior, then you don't have to be worried about people coming in late and whether they're going to submit report on time and so on. But if they're just doing it because they're fearful of the supervisor, then the supervisor will have to be micromanaging the process all the time. And there must be something in place. If you don't do this, I am going to do that. So if people are just conforming because they're fearful of the consequences, then you might need to take a look as to whether or not that's the way you want to operate. And especially in an educational setting, this transition, all right? So the one we're going to deal with is paradigm changes. Is this is what we call transformation. And it simply says that the revised behavioral outlook that you're observing is not because people are fearful of consequences or anything like that. It's because the root causes of the behavior, they have been modified. You get that? Behavioral pattern, any behavioral pattern, the theory says, is underpinned by psychological schemas. What people believe, their convictions, their assumptions, and so on. Simple, but the theory says if those underpin, if the root causes change, if they modify, then the behavior itself will modify. But that's a deeper version of change. Now, so in your role as supervisor, or in your instructional role where you're trying to get learners to portray, there's one theory that defines learning as a permanent change in behavior, if you're looking at Skinner and behaviorism. There are other theoretical constructs that say, well, yeah, that's a way to plan. The humanists will say, well, people can change and decide, people can learn, and decide that they're not going to change their behavior. So you get into the battle of, who's right and who's wrong in terms of theory. But pendulum change, paradigm change, says target the underpinnings of the behavior. And if those things are modified, then the behavior itself will modify. Now, you are only human, I always say this, John. So you have to decide. In the relationship that you have with the individual, whoever you're trying to bring about change in, do you have the time to invest in paradigm change?
Good question.
So I'm not telling you that you should abandon change by exception and just say, look, because paradigm change, which is what we're about to go into, which is transformation, first of all, and we're going to do a couple things just to bring that out, when you're targeting anything in the affective, the underpinning, beliefs, values, and convictions, when you target those, it becomes a sort of emotionally charged relationship. Okay? And you might not even be prepared to deal with the emotional overpouring that might take place. And sometimes in a work situation or a teacher learning situation, I do a lot of that with my students because they're going out to be teachers. And students come in with, I have one famous example. A student told me, one of my postgrad students, who's a new postgrad coordinator, that students should not know that a teacher does not know anything, know something at any point in time. And I say, so what are you going to do if you really don't know? And his explanation was that, well, not knowing right now does not mean I don't know.
Yeah, but you don't know.
But you don't know.
He said, not knowing right now does not mean I don't know. So he would never, a teacher should never let students know that the teacher does not know. That's his belief. Now, can you think of the kind of behavior that that belief will drive?
Yes. Man, oh man. Oh my
And the
God.
ripple effect of
Oh
that.
yes.
Because students sometimes have impressionable minds. And you're in a sort of, in terms of positionality in the teaching learning environment,
Suppose you're a teacher in the army, Dr. Brown.
well, that's sort of autocratic. So, when you are in a situation where you're working with people or someone is going to be a teacher at some point, hopefully, and you're picking up that sort of fundamental conviction, I call it, then you have to do something about it. Okay? So that is one situation where you now target the underpinning, whatever exists in the effective. And again, the effective is how people feel, what they value, and so on. So we can ask the first question. In your role as instructor, lecturer, educator, trainer, supervisor, which version of change do you typically go for?
I'm still not clear, sir.
On?
In a structural way, change by exception. And in context, I understand
Right.
what you're saying, but I'd love to see the definition.
We can go to the definition. You don't touch the, why do you touch the change this thing going on? Page down, page up. Okay. Alright, so I can give you this PowerPoint.
Different ways of thinking, make an exception. Makes an exception.
Yeah, you make an exception to your preferred behavior.
Yes.
And it's because you're fearful of consequences.
Yes.
Good? So you might say to a student, do not come into the classroom with your cap on. Do not come into the class with your cap on. And you stop the students, especially at the sort of tertiary level. So why can't I wear my cap in the classroom? Well, change by exception. Well, if you wear your cap in the classroom, you're going to be punished. And then you have to tell them what the punishment is. Like in our classroom, they have do not use your cell phones. And the first question, an obvious question, is or else what? So what will happen if people use their cell phones in the classroom?
More learning will take.
No. There's a thing in the VTDI classroom that says do not use your cell phone. I'm saying what is the consequence if you break that rule?
You commit a minor offense.
And what is the punishment?
It's not observed.
No.
There's no
Right, because there is no consequence linked to it that will cause anybody to be fair. So what people are, and whenever I do train the train and I point with people always want to know or else what?
Yeah, have to leave.
They're actually
No,
but there's no policy.
In other words, my take is, it's almost now leaving into the responsibility of the lecturer
right.
to determine,
Yeah,
to determine
determine
what
consequence.
kind of punishment. Either I'm going to take away the phone,
Right.
or I'm going to send you.
Can the lecturer take away a phone?
No.
So without we get into the specifics of that, we can talk about that one. But I'm saying, the desired behavior is you should be in the room and you should not be using your cell phone. Right. Well, what is it? What is it? If you run the red light, you're going to be ticketed, you're going to go to court, you might be fined or confined or both. So you know what the consequences are. And so you restrain your behavior. Now we're saying if the desired behavior that you want, we're going for change by exception, if there's no consequence linked to it that will cause people to be frightened in any way, then it's not going to be effective. It's not going to be effective. So you understand why students use their cell phones in the room. Because there's nothing that's, you probably would not use your cell phone on the airplane when they say turn them off, put them away. Why? Because they will have agents take you off. And so you're fearful of that. So again, we come back to it, which version of change do you target?
Okay.
What if you don't run the red light because you are careful not to cause an accident?
It's a fear.
So that means you are not operating because you're fearful of consequences.
No, that's
You
not
might be-
consequence. That's consequence.
No, the question you asked was, what if you don't run the light because you?
Because you don't want to be in
Cause
an
an
accident.
accident.
So you're fearful of-
So you're fearful of the consequence.
Right, so that says a consequence.
Yeah, you're fearful of the consequence.
But that's not necessarily a punishment as it
He's not
is
fearful of the
related to-
legal consequences.
Well, you're not fearful of the, I mean, you don't have to think of consequence in legal context.
Hello,
Yes.
Right.
hello, if you cause an accident and it's your fault, you're prosecuted.
Yeah, but
For running the lights as well as the careless driving.
Calvin, catch it.
It's loss of life.
I do not run the red light because I know that when I come to the intersection, if there are people there before me, I should wait. I believe that.
Right.
And think of the multiplier effect if every single individual in the country hold that particular kind of belief. Then you would not need a stoplight.
Sure, that's where I'm going. That's exactly
Fine.
the point I'm making.
So if your people genuinely operate, if you genuinely believe that, you should wait your turn. Then we could have a sort of orderly society, and we could cut costs at the national level by eliminating street lights. But we don't have that. So,
Dr. Brown.
question,
so-
go.
Sorry?
Go for it.
No, it's a statement. Yes, back to the cell phone in the classroom.
Right.
It is, why do you want them not to use their cell phone? The reason is you don't want ringing interrupting the class.
Right.
And therefore, what you want really is silence.
Okay.
So it's not that they shouldn't use their phone because they are adults.
Right.
So you want silence. So you tell them to put their phones on silence. And
Right.
if they get a call, go outside.
So you, and that's another deviation from the posting in the room which says do not use your cell phone.
Yeah,
So
because
you're now qualifying that to say use your cell phone but use it in a sort of silent way.
yeah.
Right. So
Because we have a situation where we say we have adults, learners, and we have to treat them a certain way. The adult learners are husbands, wives, mothers.
Mothers, fathers.
Can you really say you can't use your cell phone? You're treating them like children.
well, again, I don't know. That's again. I suspect it's a policy of the institution. I'm not sure. I'm just looking at the behavioral pattern. So,
Yeah.
whatever desired behavior you want, you have to make that behavior known, and you let people know what the consequences are for not behaving in that manner. That is simple change by exception. All right. So, paradigm change is where we're going, and I'm gonna have to switch this because this is not my presentation. I'll just put this up because. Now, just to be sure, especially when people are supervising, I'm not saying you need change by exception to maintain order in any situation. Okay, you can't just have people, overrunning the process because and doing whatever they feel like doing because you say, well, I'm going to be humanist about this, and I'm not going to attack the behavior. Because if you're focused on paradigm changes, the transformation, I said in a sort of cautious way, but the behavior that you're observing, you're not overly concerned about it. You get that? The behavior, you're not frightened by behavior if you're going for paradigm change, because your mission is to find out what underpins the behavior. So you don't attack the behavior. Because if you attack the behavior, then you build up resentment. And in a part of the strategy to achieve a paradigm change is that you must build a bridge between you and the individual. Because you're going to have to engage in discourse to get an understanding as to what the underpinning underpinnings are of the individual's behavioral pattern, what those really are. Now, the way for you to get a sense as to what my belief system is, what my values are, is to engage me in conversation. But if you attack my behavior, then I'm not going to be talking to you. So you build up resentment, and resentment becomes a sort of a roadblock when you're trying to get transformation. Is where we are?
But my challenge, is that sometimes the supervisors, they themselves might need to be the ones that need to change.
They're human beings just the same, yeah. So,
therefore, how do you manage that kind of process?
it's the same process. When an overall supervisor is reporting to someone else, so it does not really, this does not terminate at any level in any organization, any teaching level, because myself as an educator, trainer, in the classroom where I have students, but as you think about people who are instructional leaders, they too go into the process with their own fundamental beliefs, and sometimes an institution might say, well, the way you are relating to students, what we're observing, we're not satisfied. It's not ideal, it's not what we want. So therefore, they're really saying that there needs to be change. So from the theoretical standpoint, it's the same approach that you take. Because whoever you are, one of the key things that you have to understand from transformative theory is that as a human being, let me put it this way, reflect on your having gone through primary school and secondary schooling. You went to a class called mathematics, right? English language, English literature, geography, you went to any of those? Mm-hmm. Have you ever gone to a class called values? Beliefs? No. So you learned mathematical concepts directly, deliberately. Mm-hmm. Where did you learn your values and so on? They're passive acquisition.
Passive. Very passive.
Is where we are?
From church,
so passive acquisition, right?
I mean, the whole school environment, devotion at school, all of those.
Fine,
no,
but
not in a structured way.
Not in a structured way, but guess what? Those are the underpinnings of your behavior.
Yeah, that's what makes you do.
Is where we are? Mm-hmm. You learn them in a sort of passive way. We call it unconscious learning. And even though you learn them unconsciously, they dictate your behavior. Mm-hmm. So at some point, if you get a chance to read Transformative Theory, there's a line I like from Jack Mesereau, which said, a chapter from Mesereau that's learning to think like an adult. And it calls into question whatever you believe, whatever you value. Where did you get those from? Where did you inherit them from? And there comes a time as an adult where you need to sort of check in on your beliefs and values. Now, in some situations, people really, by the time you get to adult life and you're steeped in your values and beliefs, they become fundamental. So values become fundamental values. Beliefs become fundamental beliefs. The fundamental attitude is just saying that they're deep-rooted. They might very well be consistent. There was a famous statement in Jamaica once that some people are irredeemable. You remember that? And you engage with some human beings, and you are, even though as an educator I should not be holding up that for the thinking, but sometimes you really have to wonder, I put it a wonder, if some people are irredeemable.
I mean, if some people are redeemable.
Irredeemable.
No, I heard it.
Yeah.
He said that the same word, some people are irredeemable.
Well, I mean, that is a situation I'm saying, and it will never change.
To some extent, it seems to be true.
Okay.
That's the direction you're going. I'm just keeping it there and irredeemable, saying some people you encounter just cannot change. And you might have stories about people in your own experiences that you can use as examples. Now, they tell us that as educators we should not be saying that kind of thing because, learning can change anyone, but go for it.
Yeah, Dr. One of the things that I'm looking at closely as it relates to this paradigm change that I'm looking at.
Right.
And as Michelle mentioned earlier, in relation to like supervisors, who supervises me, who supervises the person that supervises me, that sort of thing, is that not only will this type of change require a lot of time,
Yes.
And in the context of teaching and learning, you have a set time, as it were, to interface with
Yes.
with the students.
Right.
That's just one point. The other point that I want to make as well, in order for this paradigm change to take place,
Right.
it is suggesting to me that there will have to be other characteristics that are in place. So for example, one, it takes into place the interpersonal skills of the individual
Yes.
as well. Because
The supervisor?
right, the supervisor, the interpersonal skills of the individual, of that supervisor, because that will come into play, because I'm seeing a lot of building relationship in relation to acquiring that change. Because as I say, if there's not a relationship, some things you can say or you can do or you can approach based on the fact that there's a relationship.
Right.
But if on the outset, as you said, you are to attack the behavior,
Right.
then there's going to be resistance. So for me, there has to be those sort of competency, skills in place, intact in the individual,
right,
for that sort of successful paradigm.
Which is why we say you facilitate a paradigm change. You facilitate transformation. You don't facilitate change by exception. You tell people what the rules are and what the consequences are. And people are supposed to comply. If they don't comply, then the consequences take effect.
I wonder the paradigm change. You don't have aspects of the others mentioned in it.
Aspects of the other version of change.
Yes.
Yeah, because at some point we're gonna look at the outline for